Finance Committee will come to order. It's going to be a hectic morning. We're first going to consider two pending nominations before the Finance Committee, Jay Shambaugh and Rebecca Haffagee. And we've got lots of committees conducting business, and certainly we're going to have a full morning here in Finance. After consulting with Ranking Member Crapo, and I appreciate his cooperation as always, here's how we're going to proceed. We'll use the time now to make statements about the nominees. I'll make a brief statement followed by Senator Crapo, then followed by any other finance members who wish to make statements. At that point, we'll either vote or recess until the next roll call vote on the Senate floor, when the committee will reconvene in the President's room off the floor to have the vote. My understanding is that's acceptable to Senator Crapo?
Yes.
All right. My statement with respect to the nominees is, first up will be Dr. Rebecca Haffagee. She's been nominated to serve as the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, the Department of Health and Human Services. This role is right at the center of the department's efforts on our biggest health challenges. One example that came up during the hearing on Dr. Haffagee's nomination is a major priority for both sides of this committee. It is a topic Senator Crapo and I talk about often. It is improving mental health care in America. It's essential to have a full team and all available expertise working on the issue, as well as many others which are within the Department of Health and Human Services purview. Dr. Haffagee is highly qualified for the job and ready to go, having served as Assistant Secretary since early 2021. Then we'll have Dr. Jay Shambaugh, nominated to serve as Undersecretary for International Affairs at Treasury, another essential job. Cracking down on trade cheats, fighting currency manipulation. Particularly important, of course, is the administration of economic sanctions on Russia. Dr. Shambaugh is a respected expert on international economics. He also brings valuable experience as a member of the Council on Economic Advisors. These are highly qualified nominees, colleagues. They demonstrated their qualifications in their nomination hearing earlier this month. They both stated their willingness to work hard with the committee in the months and years ahead. I look forward to supporting their nominations, and I urge my colleagues to vote to approve them as well. Now we'll hear from Senator Crapo on the nominees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's markup on the nomination of Jay Shambaugh for Undersecretary for International Affairs at the U.S. Treasury and Rebecca Haffagee for HHS Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. At both the Departments of Treasury and HHS, the Biden administration has repeatedly failed to consult substantively with Congress on key policymaking decisions. Let me begin by noting that both Dr. Haffagee and Dr. Shambaugh are accomplished in their respective fields. However, I'm disappointed by their responses to questions by my colleagues, those that they and I asked them in the hearing and subsequently in questions for the record. In response to my colleagues' questions regarding abortion, public health emergencies, and religious liberty, Dr. Haffagee was evasive. For many of these questions, she only stated she would follow the law. That should always be the case if she were to be confirmed. However, her unwillingness to provide any indication regarding her thoughts on the issues at hand does not reflect a good faith effort at dialogue and partnership with Congress, and gives me concern that she would support efforts by the HHS Secretary to circumvent state laws and individuals' constitutional rights. Turning to Dr. Shambaugh, he declined to acknowledge fully in the hearing and in responses to questions for the record that the American Rescue Plan and proposed reckless tax and spending programs urged by the Biden administration have exacerbated inflation and now threaten to plunge the economy into recession. Fortunately, Dr. Shambaugh did acknowledge in his response to my questions for the record that, and I quote, "Inflation remains unacceptably high, and I agree with the President that inflation should be the administration's top economic priority." While the Fed has the primary role of fighting inflation, I believe that the Biden administration must do its part to end inflation, including by stopping reckless and partisan spending, including through reconciliation, relieving businesses of burdensome regulation, ending its war on American energy, and desisting from its plans to crush American workers and families with new onerous taxes. Raising taxes, especially in the face of recession and stagflation, leads to higher costs and inevitably lower wages and higher prices. Workers are hurt, and prices in the midst of the highest inflation in more than 40 years. If confirmed, Dr. Shamba and the rest of the Biden administration should heed this advice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleague. Would Senator Grassley like to make a statement? Please go ahead.
The way my schedule is today, and just in case you don't get it here, you might do this off the floor.
Right.
Would it be possible for me to express my support for Mr. Shambaugh and my opposition to the other nominee before us?
Of course.
Would that be possible?
Of course.
Because I don't think I'm going to be able to stand around the floor to
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that courtesy.
All right. Any other colleagues that wish? Okay. We'll, as we indicated, be voting off the floor. We're now going to turn to the nomination of Doug McKalip to serve as the Chief Agricultural Negotiator within the Office of the United States Trade Representative. He brings vast experience to this job. Nearly 30 years of public service before him, including in a variety of roles focused on ag policy and the well-being of rural communities in America. He's now a top advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack on Trade, Ag Safety, National Security, and other issues. He's hosted in several other leadership positions at the Department of Agriculture with the Domestic Policy Council, and his service there has been exemplary. A lot of fans on both sides of the committee, and his nomination comes at a key time. As our nominee knows, our families are understandably furious about the proposition that they're paying more for groceries and they're getting less. Farmers and ranchers are being oppressed by drought and hammered by increased costs. Across the world, people are desperate at the prospect of widespread hunger as crops fail and basic food items are in short supply. War, climate change, all of this compounded by short-sighted trade policies and supply chain disruptions have created fear all over the world about the possibility of a 21st century hunger catastrophe. Now, the Finance Committee has authority over one key part of how we're going to wrestle this crisis to the ground: a smart trade policy that promotes affordable, abundant food here at home and abroad. This policy, no pressure, Mr. Nominee, it's got to support our farmers and ranchers and allow for maximum production by busting through trade barriers and lowering costs for key inputs like fertilizer. It's also got to focus on opening and expanding export markets to ensure our farmers can continue to do what they do best, keeping the world fed. This ag negotiator position is essential because we have got to insist on the elimination of foreign regulations that hamper food distribution wherever it takes place, because, and this is what it's all about, that's what you got to do to reduce hunger. The ag trade negotiator's got other responsibilities for ensuring American interests in trade agreements are met. To that point, the Trump administration rushed the new USMCA into effect, and Canada and Mexico are failing to live up to key commitments. For example, Canada is propping up barriers to our dairy products. Mexico is unfairly blocking American-grown corn and soybeans. Pretty much a similar story with respect to China. The Trump administration grabbed lots of headlines when it was interested in a new trade deal, but it failed to set up real enforcement and let many of the Chinese government's key trade ripoffs just go unscathed, unaddressed. China has failed to meet its commitments to import American agricultural products, only buying 58% of the total goods and services that it agreed to buy in 2021. That's less than it was buying before the Trump trade policy and the trade war was launched. U.S. farmers are telling us they don't want handouts. They want real opportunities to sell their products around the world. And as I told the nominee, that can only happen if this position and the policies advanced lead to finally a level playing field. That's the bottom line. The committee is also interested in discussing how our farmers and ranchers can benefit from the new Indo-Pacific economic framework, and if confirmed, our nominee will play a key role in these issues. I want to thank our nominee for joining us, for his willingness to continue his career in public service. I mentioned he's been fighting for farmers for decades, and farmers and ranchers know of your work. We appreciate the chance to have you here, and we'll have questions and answers after your statements. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And welcome, Mr. McKalip, and congratulations on your nomination. First, let me say I took the opportunity to listen to your band, Box Cartel. And you're hitting the right notes there. With your trade policy experience, I hope that if confirmed, you will also hit the right notes on improving opportunities for our farmers and ranchers. America's farmers continue to prove their resilience and productivity every day, and will keep doing so. But it's not easy. Americans are painfully aware that gas prices are up 42% from a year ago. What fewer people may know is that the price for diesel rose by an even greater margin, 68%. And that hits our farmers hard. Back in March, a fourth-generation farmer in Meridian, Idaho, explained that the cost of filling up his tractor had doubled in a year to $800. However, one bright factor for America's farmers right now is exports, with sales of agricultural products overseas reaching $177 billion in 2021. America's farmers sell more high-quality products to consumers around the world than ever before. In Idaho, if we kept what our 24,000 farms produced within the state, each Idahoan would have to eat 209 slices of bread, 40 potatoes, 3 pounds of sugar, 2 pounds of cheese, and 2 pounds of beef, and a cup of beans every single day. Fortunately, Idaho's agricultural products also feed the nation and the world, exporting 1 of every 6 rows of Idaho's potato and 50% of Idaho's wheat. Nationally, 1 in 3 acres planted in the United States will be exported. But we can sell even more. What is holding us back is, again, a misplaced Biden administration policy, a moratorium on new trade agreements, and limited enforcement of existing agreements. The administration is crystal clear that it prefers not to pursue real trade agreements in favor of something it calls frameworks, which lack crucial market access obligations. This is confusing, since market access is the main problem our farmers and ranchers face. A lot of our potential trading partners maintain high agricultural tariffs and regulatory measures that are essentially a guise for protectionism. We need to tear them down. For example, India applies an average agricultural tariff of 36%. It also applies a number of non-science-based restrictions on U.S. agriculture, such as unreasonable GMO certifications on apples, potatoes, soybeans, wheat, and other crops. If America wants to sell crops in India, these are exactly the types of issues that must be addressed. Moreover, the need to find new markets is particularly compelling because we must diversify our customer base. China is currently our largest agricultural export destination, but we need new markets to reduce our dependency and increase our leverage. Securing these markets will require more than frameworks where the government officials can just talk. It requires binding commitments that ensure our farmers can sell. Put plainly, our farmers and ranchers deserve our trading partners' markets to be open to our commerce as ours is to theirs. Hopefully, we can start a conversation today on how to apply our nominee's experience and talents toward that goal. With that, I look forward to hearing the nominee's testimony and his responses to our questions. And I also look forward to your next album when that comes out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. There's no question that the music appeal is very powerful. Mr. McKalip, welcome. Let's hear from you, and then we have some obligatory questions, but let's go with your opener.
Thank you, Chair Wyden, and thank you, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee. My name is Doug McKalip, and I am honored to appear before you as the President's nominee for Chief Agricultural Negotiator for the Office of the United States Trade Representative. I am joined here today by my wife, Debbie, and our two children, Brooke and Brendan, as well as my mom, Gloria, who shares the same Northwestern Pennsylvania roots as I do. In a federal career spanning nearly 3 decades, I have served in a wide range of capacities at the United States Department of Agriculture, which have built upon my roots and positioned me to ensure that farmers and farm workers throughout the supply chain are successful and advance our economy. Most recently, I have served as Senior Advisor for Trade and National Security to the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. And in this role, I have stood toe-to-toe and worked hand-in-hand with trading partners to ensure international market access for our products. If confirmed to this position, I will build upon this progress as Ambassador Tai and USTR aim to deliver more U.S. goods to customers and markets around the world. I would like to highlight 2 initiatives that I've worked on recently that underscore our commitment to farmers and ranchers. Recently at USDA, I helped spearhead negotiations that led to greater market access in Mexico for U.S.-grown potatoes. This meant aligning our trade and regulatory experts to reach a successful outcome on a trade issue that was more than 10 years in the making. I am proud of the results and believe that we need to double down in our resolve to get similar tangible outcomes for our producers on a wide range of commodities. This win was the result of close collaboration between USDA and USTR, and it is vital for our agricultural industry and our producers that we maintain this partnership. And based upon my history at USDA, I look forward to doing exactly that. I have also been directly involved in negotiations with my Canadian counterparts on dairy policy. This experience has provided me a direct appreciation for the difficult steps and the tenacity that we must exhibit to ensure that the promises of past trade agreements are fully realized. I know many Americans, including those from my home state of Pennsylvania, have grown somewhat weary of trade and question whether the promises in various agreements will benefit their bottom line. That is why Ambassador Tai has emphasized the importance of trading partners following through on their commitments in bilateral and multilateral engagement. Earlier this month, we celebrated the 2nd anniversary of the USMCA, and if confirmed, I can assure members of this committee that utilizing full enforcement authority under USMCA and other trade commitments and initiatives around the globe will be a top priority for me. I also look forward to ensuring farmers and ranchers are front and center as USTR looks to strengthen our trade relationships, execute new initiatives, and address challenges like China. Initiatives such as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework present an excellent opportunity to knock down regulatory barriers and help our producers expand exports. And as we all know, China has failed to live up to its commitments under Phase 1, and as Ambassador Tai works to realign the U.S.-China trade relationship and partners with allies to confront China's unfair trade policies, I will use my position as Chief Agricultural Negotiator to ensure that American farmers and ranchers get a fair deal. Additionally, farmers in the U.S. need an advocate to help ensure that they have affordable access to input materials that they need to operate. These are times of tremendous opportunity in international trade. But if the bills that farmers have to pay for their inputs negate those gains, we will have missed an opportunity. Finally, these are important times around the globe, and never before has food security and national security been as directly linked as they are today. It is vital that the Chief Agricultural Negotiator be on the job and be equipped to deal with all the facets of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. I am uniquely qualified for that task. I look forward to working with all of you in the Congress. Congress is the executive branch's constitutional partner on trade, and if confirmed, I look forward to close collaboration with the members of this committee and with Congress, since our strength in international trade depends upon our unity and strength here at home. I value the opinions and expertise of members on this committee, and I look forward to benefiting from our dialogue going forward. So I look forward to responding to any questions that members may have, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKalip. And we do have a little bit of process to go through to get off to the races here. First, is there anything that you're aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, sir.
Do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, sir.
Do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before a duly constituted committee of the Congress if you're confirmed?
Yes, I do.
Finally, do you commit to provide a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes, I do.
So I'll start with my questions, and we have the good fortune of having the chair of the Agriculture Committee here, the chair of the Commerce Committee on our side. As you know, a former U.S. Trade Representative, and of course my partner, Senator Crapo. So in my state, and we talked a little bit about this, we do a lot of things well. But what we do best is we grow things, and we do that because it's so important to put affordable foodstuffs on the kitchen table of Americans, and we understand the world is fearful, of course, of the prospect of global hunger. We start with the proposition that our farmers and ranchers are just the most competitive, the most efficient, and the hardest working people around. They can feed a hungry country, and they can lead a global effort to feed a hungry world. And a big part of putting this strategy together is to have a smart trade policy. We need an export strategy that provides new markets for our farmers. That's what they want, new markets to sell their products around the world, and gets food in the hands of the needy, both here at home and around the world. Second, we've got to work with our trading partners to eliminate these policies that distort trade and prevent ag products from getting to market, limit access, for example, to fertilizer, a very key input, obviously, for farmers, and distort global trade so that families go hungry unnecessarily. So we got to have a win-win for farmers and ranchers in our country, and we need to have policies that work around the world to avert the prospect of a global hungry crisis. So no pressure, but that's a big order. And tell us a little bit about how you're going to ensure U.S. ag products are exported to the markets in international programs that need it while generating profits for our farmers. And in my state, 1 out of 3 jobs revolve around trade.
Thank you very much for that question, Chairman Wyden. I really appreciate that. I have spent 3 decades of my career fighting on behalf of our farmers, ranchers, fishermen, foresters, et cetera. And you're right, these are unprecedented times. The conflict in Ukraine, issues relating to drought in many parts of the globe mean a bigger challenge than maybe we have faced in quite a long time in terms of both food security and making sure that everyone is fed. I believe the unwritten narrative and what is emerging every day out there means that the American farmer really is going to make the difference in the years ahead with respect to these crises. Our farmers have proven resilience even in the face of difficult climate and precipitation challenges they can produce. So what I would like to do and what I plan to do if confirmed as Chief Agricultural Negotiator is to help ensure that we've got open lines of commerce. Unfortunately, given the war, you saw many countries sort of work in an insular fashion to try to erect export barriers and to try to shut down cooperation. But what will really get us through this crisis is sharing, the same as we would in any community that endures tough times. We need to work with each other.
Let's do this. Let's talk about specific trade barriers for a moment. So I think if I was having a round table, and I bet my colleagues do these as well with farmers, they would talk about fertilizer. What about export challenges that are going to make it possible for them to get more affordable fertilizer? And what can you do and what will you pursue?
You bet. So one of the challenges relating to fertilizer, and that is a major driver for farmers' bottom line because it's a major cost that they have when they plant, when they grow. One challenge that we face right now is that China, for example, has shut down exports of urea and other nitrate-based materials that are used in the manufacturing of fertilizer. So if confirmed to this position as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, I would want to work directly engage with my Chinese counterparts to see how we can open up the flow of key inputs and minerals that can be used here at home for the manufacture of fertilizer. Because having those be shut off is, quite frankly, affecting the marketplace, and it's ultimately affecting the bottom line for our farmers.
I'm out of time. What about stockholding and those kinds of barriers?
Thank you, Chairman Wyden. Yes, we have, as a nation, very good information about the stock-to-use ratio for grains of many countries around the world. Unfortunately, we have a few actors out there. China is one of them. I think India is another that don't openly share what their stock-to-use ratios are. And so, as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, I would push for greater transparency to ensure that we have a better understanding of the marketplace and are in a better position to help everyone who has a food security challenge.
Make that a real priority, because I just think that is unacceptable to be withholding that kind of information when we're looking at the need to have a policy that works for our farmers and also address the prospect of global hunger shortages. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. McKalip, both Senator Wyden and I have noted that many of our trading partners maintain measures ostensibly for food safety, but that are really just disguised protectionism to keep out U.S. agricultural products. I really appreciate what you emphasized in your opening statement about your role in helping to address one of those relating to U.S. potatoes in Mexico. As you indicated, that's been a 10-year battle, and frankly, it's still going on, but we've made some good progress, and I appreciate that. I strongly believe that such safety measures must be supported by legitimate science. With respect to the IPEF process that the administration is currently pursuing, do you think it makes sense to pursue rules to ensure health and food safety measures that are based on science, like those found in the WTO SPS agreement?
Yes, thank you, Ranking Member Crapo. My experience working as a regulator in the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service has given me a firsthand experience into what it means for plant health, animal health, and how those plug in or don't plug into international trade. So as we work and we begin to work in the Indo-Pacific area, which present a tremendous opportunity for U.S. farm products, there's huge markets there that we need to capitalize on. I would like to be a strong advocate for ensuring that we have alignment, compatibility of the sanitary and phytosanitary provisions to ensure that there aren't barriers to our farmers getting their fruits, vegetables, meat products, et cetera, into those markets based upon a regulator in another country that has made a determination that isn't consistent with.
So here's the question I'm kind of going to drive at. As I indicated in my opening statement, the administration will not engage in trade negotiations for new trade agreements right now, and instead is pursuing this framework in the Indo-Pacific. But the rules that we've both just talked about now are enforceable under trade agreements. How do we make them enforceable in the context of the IPEF framework?
Yep. So, Senator Crapo, I believe, given the structure of IPEV and the pillars that are present in it, that we have a lot of flexibility to argue for and include provisions that will provide us the kinds of tools and leverage that you're looking for, even if the three letters FTA aren't necessarily there. The actual agreements on ag products and the work that we'll do on market access can achieve the same effect. And that's going to be incumbent upon me. That's going to be, I'll be responsible for doing the advocacy necessary to build that into those.
But if you have it in the form of some kind of an executive agreement, how is that enforceable? I mean, as we've talked about with regard to, say, the potatoes in Mexico and other circumstances around the globe, we are constantly in need of enforcing the agreements. How does that happen under IPEF?
Yeah, I think whether there are enforcement measures in IPEV and what those look like is yet to be determined. So I would if confirmed, be an advocate within the process to push for actual enforcement mechanisms. As you have mentioned and referenced, USMCA has given us very clear enforcement mechanisms, which we've now begun to use on a few commodities. Having that lever in the toolbox is important, and I certainly would, if confirmed, advocate for as much leverage and solid things that we can point to and utilize.
All right, I appreciate that. I think that's a really critical issue. There's bipartisan concern that the USTR is not adequately consulting with Congress on trade policy. And that's particularly a shame when it comes to agricultural trade policy because Congress is very close to our farmers and ranchers. I believe we both agree that U.S. trade policy is strongest when Congress and the administration are working together. And so to that end, I want to ask you, do you agree that Congress must see all administration proposals for binding trade obligations before they are provided to our trading partners so that we can have meaningful input?
Yes, Senator Crapo, in my 30-year career, I think I've been really effective on behalf of farmers and ranchers. And my positions themselves didn't always carry a great level of authority. So my authority basically was derived from the ability to speak on behalf of the U.S. government and on behalf of principals, which, if confirmed, I'll become a principal, and I look forward to that opportunity. But I believe if I'm standing toe-to-toe overseas with a trading partner, that having the voice of the executive branch and the legislative branch unified on farm issues puts me in the strongest position to get results on behalf of farmers and ranchers. And I would certainly want to cooperate closely with you, other members here, and make sure that we have that kind of unified message. That's the only way that we can be fully successful.
I agree with you on that and appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Senator Portman's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. McKalip, I wanted to come today to have an opportunity to see you and to thank you for your willingness to step up and serve at a new and important level as one of the ambassadors for the United States, and in this case, an ambassador for farmers and for our legitimate ag interests that are not being fairly treated around the world. You know, the level playing field term gets thrown around a lot, but it's so appropriate with regard to agriculture. We have some of the most productive farmland in the world, the most efficient farmers in the world, and yet so many countries put in place barriers, whether they're tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers, and so you're going to have your hands full. I must say, I appreciate your response to Senator Crapo, but I think we have to be honest here. We are not talking about trade opening agreements when we talk about IPEF or other frameworks. If you're Vietnam or another country in that framework, and the United States is not willing to talk about trade opening, on both sides of the equation, there is no prospect, in my view, from my experience at USTR, that you're going to be able to come up with an agreement. They open their market to our agricultural products, often in exchange, as you know, for other openings that they get into our market or other countries' markets, and that's not part of the IPEF, as you know. So that's my big concern. Again, I'm pleased that you stepped up, and I think that you have the ability to make a difference here, but I hope that you will agree today to be an advocate for changing the policy. I mean, it's shooting ourselves in the foot not to have a single trade negotiating agreement going on today, not to have a single ounce of effort being expended toward getting Trade Promotion Authority expanded, which is necessary for Congress to have its rightful role. You said earlier that you thought that there could be some enforcement mechanisms in IPEF. I guess that means that Congress gets cut out of that. And again, we have a role here to play that can be very constructive, as you saw with USMCA, where this committee played a central role, including the chair and ranking member. So I'm looking at Ohio agriculture today. Our fertilizer and diesel costs have both doubled. Fertilizer often even more than that. We are looking for foreign markets. We're glad to see some openings in some places. We have a great opportunity this year because we've got, at least in most parts of the country, including Ohio, some really positive conditions for a great crop, and yet these barriers exist. So when you talked earlier about you want to be able to open lines of commerce in terms of talking to the countries, I would just suggest we need to open markets for export, not just open lines for commerce. Not sure what that means. So can you respond to that? What would you do, if confirmed, to try to get us back into a position where we're actually attempting to achieve market access and actually being successful in achieving it?
Yes, thank you, Senator Portman. Really appreciate that. My hometown in Pennsylvania, by the way, is about 12 miles from the Ohio border, so I've had an opportunity to spend time and definitely understand a lot of the same issues that your farmers are interested in, and the same ones that ones from my home area are as well. With respect to IPEV, which you specifically referenced, I believe there are tremendous market access opportunities. And we've seen with Vietnam, for example, their recent switch in policy on biotechnology and becoming a little bit closer aligned with where the U.S. is as a sign that we can get better flow of U.S. goods to these marketplaces. Right now, just using biotechnology policy as an example, the positions that many Asian countries have with respect to biotech approvals don't represent the current science. They don't represent where the science is heading, for example, on genome editing. So we have an opportunity to basically advance and get those policies more closely in alignment with reality, which will provide a fair and open way for our row crops and other products to get into those marketplaces. But certainly, if confirmed, I would be an advocate within the administration to push for as many leveraging tools as we can possibly have to actually hold countries accountable in those relationships that we have.
Leverage for farmers in America comes from our willingness to engage and have market access. That's been our experience, and so you're going to have your hands full, and I hope you will be an advocate for changing the current policy. It just makes no sense. It makes no sense for, you know, any agricultural interest in America, but even on a political basis or a partisan basis, you know, we should be back in the game. One specific question, and I'll let you go. UK, we're about 4/5 of the way toward an agreement with the United Kingdom. They've made huge concessions on agriculture to New Zealand and Australia in the last year, as you know. We're not taking advantage of those because we won't complete that agreement. We're 4/5 of the way there. This is with UK, you know, arguably our greatest ally in the world. Geopolitical significance is clear. But even on agriculture, obviously there's some opportunities so it's just to take advantage of what they're giving to these other countries. What are your thoughts on that? Are you willing to sit down with the UK and complete that agreement?
So in my role with USDA, I actually flew over to Europe, met with many of my regulatory counterparts from the UK, and you're absolutely correct. There's a tremendous opportunity as they have left the EU. They are now forming their own systems and their own programs. So this is the time to capitalize on making sure we have market access and have market alignment there. So if confirmed, the EU...
my time is up. They're making agreements with other countries, giving them agricultural access that we should have, and yet we're not able to take advantage of it because we won't complete that agreement.
No, I would work for access for our farm products and ranch products to the UK, and if confirmed, that'll be a major regional focus for me as ag negotiator.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I thank my colleague. Next is Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Crapel, thanks for holding today's hearing, and Mr. McKalip, thank you for your service at USDA. We're now a year and a half into the Biden administration. We're just now getting a nominee for Chief Ag Negotiator before the committee, and while the administration has dragged its feet on making this position a priority, our nation's agricultural producers have been without a leading voice on the global stage, which I think is simply inexcusable. It's all the more inexcusable when our ag community is dealing with 40-year high inflation, rising input costs, supply chain challenges, and increased international competition. I hope Mr. McKalip's nomination serves as a turning point for the administration when it comes to trade, and especially for America's farmers and ranchers. Mr. McKalip, I remain deeply concerned that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework fails to include market access for agriculture. For generations, a large part of our nation's economic success has been based on the U.S. advocating for more, not less, open markets. For example, U.S. food and products exports grew from $46.1 billion in 1994 to more than $177 billion in 2021, which is largely due to greater market access opportunities for American exporters. Under this administration, however, there are no trade agreements under discussion, and increased market access for any U.S. product seems to be a taboo subject. Meanwhile, other countries, including China, are driving ahead with new trade agreements and open market access for their agricultural products. So if confirmed, how will you advocate for market access opportunities for U.S. farmers and ranchers, and what are some specific market access opportunities and tariff reductions that would benefit U.S. agricultural interests?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Thune. Appreciate that question. And you referenced the position being vacant, and I assure you, if you talk to, anyone who's worked with me, they know that I will pedal harder to make up for lost time, to make sure that we get the kind of results for market access that our farmers want. IPEV has 4 pillars, and trade is one of those 4 pillars. And when I initially, studied how the structure is set up, I thought that trade only being one of the 4 doesn't really, balance with what farmers would expect in terms of getting results for sending their products over to Asia. The way, if confirmed, that I would approach IPEV and be an advocate within the administration is to not think of it the way we think of a traditional 4-pillar building, but think of a lodgepole structure where trade is the centerpiece and the most central and to the actual structural integrity of IPEV. So if confirmed, I would push very hard for, number 1, trade to be a much larger percentage of the results compared to, clean economies or the connected economies, the other sections of IPEV. Because, again, I think that if we are able to, as we so far have gotten better access to beef in Japan, better access to pork in India, that we can triple our efforts and essentially ensure that IPEV contains the kinds of market access that your ranchers are expecting in South Dakota. I believe I'm the advocate to help get that done, and I look forward to pushing for that within the IPEV structure and other ones that we have underway right now, too.
So you agree that greater market access is a fundamental component of American agriculture if we're going to compete in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, absolutely. Not just in the Indo-Pacific, but around the globe. I think, a lot of the things that our farmers are providing, I think our farmers' products sell themselves, that they are the best quality of anywhere in the world, the best reliability, and that there are consumers around the globe that want those products. But we've got governments in those countries that are standing essentially between your farmer, your rancher, and that consumer over there. So it's going to be my duty to break down those barriers and to give our farmers a chance to sell their products and show what they can do.
That is, and we need free trade agreements. I mean, this is an area of the world where we ought to be competing hard. But in order for that to happen, we've got to focus on market access and not a lot of the other stuff that oftentimes gets mentioned in the IPEF. Let me ask you one question about an issue that's important in my state of South Dakota. We've got cattle producers who work hard every day to produce high-quality beef. Americans recognize this, and they want to know where their food's coming from, which is why I'm a longtime supporter of mandatory country of origin labeling, or what we call MCOOL. Last year, I introduced the American Beef Labeling Act, which would direct the Office of the U.S. Trade Rep to develop a WTO-compliant means of reinstating COOL for beef. If confirmed, would you commit to working with me and my staff on finding a path forward on COOL to help address the concerns of livestock producers in South Dakota and across the country?
Thank you, Senator Thune. Part of my career, I actually worked on implementation of COOL at USDA. So I see the value that consumers want, knowledge and transparency, and certainly the American brand sells itself when the consumer has a chance to know when they're able to get American products. So my priority as Chief Agricultural Negotiator would be to arrive at a policy and approach that can withstand future challenge, and so that we don't have a system where the pendulum is swinging back and forth, but that we can get something in place that can be more permanent and something that our consumers can gain trust in and know will be there for them as a signal in the marketplace.
We'll look forward to working with you on that, and expect that you will be a fierce advocate for us on this issue.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Thune. Senator Bennett's next.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. McKalip, for your willingness to serve. And Ambassador Tai was kind enough to participate in a roundtable with farmers and ranchers in Colorado to talk about the importance of trade to our state's agricultural economy. And as you probably know, our top agricultural export product is homegrown Colorado beef. Our cattle ranchers gladly welcome the U.S.-Japan beef safeguard deal that was struck earlier this year, and I just wanted to tell you that they said that to her. We appreciate it. I also, of course, share the view that our growth is going to come from market access, and a lot of that's going to be the Indo-Pacific region, but you've covered that already today, so let me go to something of specific importance to me. You mentioned potatoes and your work on potatoes. Colorado's San Luis Valley is the second largest fresh potato growing region in the country. Our potato farmers have long struggled, as you know, with market access into the Mexican marketplace. In May, after 25 years of disputes, as you mentioned, the USDA and USTR had a positive breakthrough allowing exports of Colorado potatoes into Mexico. However, there are additional legal fights that may block this new access. I just want to know how you plan to ensure the U.S. potatoes maintain access to the Mexican market, and whether you will commit to using every tool at USTR's disposal, including mechanisms through USMCA, to hold Mexico accountable so that we actually get this implemented properly and the farmers in the San Luis Valley have the chance to sell their incredible product in Mexico.
Yes, Senator Bennett, I appreciate that question. You know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into getting that market access on the part of all of us. So maintaining it, I think every tool would be on the table to make sure that there's no back slippage or any loss of that access that we now have for our potatoes. Something I want to share, this is a little personal, but I think it's really illustrative of the importance for potato growers. My wife Debbie is here behind me. Her uncle, who is a lifelong resident of Swampscott, Massachusetts, Army veteran, he was in the Signal Corps and learned Spanish as part of his service. After his wife passed away, he decided, drier climate, warmer climate, he decided to move to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And after the potato agreement was reached, he called me and he asked, how soon are the potatoes going to be here? And I said, well, you know, I'm not going to tell you anything that you can't read in the paper, but very soon you're going to see them down there. Why are you asking me this question? He said, the potatoes that we have access to here are not the same consistency. They have a different starchiness. They cook differently. He said, when I come back up to the U.S., you know, for Thanksgiving and for holidays, I can't wait to get an American potato. How soon am I going to see American potatoes down here in our marketplace? And it was a reminder to me, as a lot of us work tirelessly on agricultural trade, that we think about, you know, offering maybe a lower price or et cetera to a foreign market. But there really are consumers out there that want what your growers in Colorado make. And that's something for them to be proud of, but it's something for people like me to work double time to make sure that we are not facing barriers to them getting their product to those consumers.
Well, I appreciate that answer. That I just have a second left, but I think the chairman might and the ranking member might appreciate this. In the San Luis Valley in Colorado, which of course was once part of Mexico and once part of Spain, there is a marker there that identifies the very first agricultural ditch in Colorado, and water is everything in Colorado and in the West. And on that name and on that post are the names of the people who were entitled to draw water from that ditch. It's called the People's Ditch, the first ditch in Colorado. And on that post is the name Salazar, which belongs to my predecessor, Ken Salazar, who was elected from Colorado to represent us in the United States Senate, and now happens to be the United States ambassador to Mexico. So I know this is an issue that's near and dear to his heart, and I thought I'd mention that connection. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Bennett, for a very important set of questions, and we have such fond remembrances of our colleague who served on this committee, Senator Salazar. Senator Stabenow, the chair of the Agriculture Committee, our go-to person.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wyden and Ranking Member Crapo, for the hearing, and welcome, Mr. McKalip. We're so glad to have you in front of us and to have your nomination in front of us. We definitely need a chief agriculture negotiator as soon as possible. I know that from the Agriculture Committee standpoint, with myself and Senator Bozeman, we have been urging that this happen as quickly as possible. And I know with the breadth of knowledge that you have, what you bring to the role from your career working on a wide range of issues at USDA, that it's incredibly important that we get your talent and skills to work as soon as possible for our farmers and ranchers in rural communities. So I look forward to supporting your confirmation. Obviously, enforcement is very, very important, as well as how we negotiate opening up markets. Our farmers need markets, as we've talked about today. We all know safest, most affordable food supply in the world, and we need markets as to be successful. So I wonder if you might talk specifically about Canada, our friends in Canada, and the dairy market access commitments that we were able to negotiate under USMCA. Dairy is our top commodity in Michigan, and it's really critical that Canada follow through. We know that Ambassador Tai has been focused on the issue, the first trade case that she brought, which was great. But as you know, Canada's response and lack of meaningful changes has been very, very disappointing in this area. So how can we make sure that this second dairy case is successful and results in the real change we need to see from Canada, so our dairy farmers see the full benefits of this agreement that we fought so hard to get?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Stabenow. Nice to see you. The dairy farmers in this country are the hardest working farmers there are. I think if you talk to anybody in agriculture, they would all agree that there's no harder workers than dairy. And all of us, you all up here, USDA fought really hard for those provisions of USMCA. And this is really one of our first opportunities to utilize those tools and to make sure that USMCA will be effective going down the path. So we were successful in the first phase, but Canada's response to that decision fell far short of the mark, absolutely did not provide the kind of market access that our dairy producers deserve. And we will fight fully for full retail access to the market in Canada for our dairy products. So USDA cooperated very closely with USTR to file the second round. The kind of tenacity that we showed on potatoes, I assure you, Chairwoman Stabenow, we will utilize on dairy. This is not something that we will let rest, and we will continue to work directly with the Canadians until we get the kind of market access that our farmers believe that they deserve, that we believe they deserve. And quite frankly, you know, I mentioned in my opening statement some weariness. We have a lot of dairy folks in our home area of Pennsylvania and our family involved in and around dairy. We need to be successful on trade agreement enforcement, because if we're not, it just is a way for folks to question what they can believe in terms of government. So I take that very strongly in my responsibility to make sure that we deliver results and that farmers see the kind of access that they deserve.
Thank you so much. And we've talked a lot about the unscientific SPS, or the sanitary and phytosanitary barriers, other technical barriers, non-tariff trade barriers that we face when we are selling abroad. This is a continual issue for us, years and years. I've been focused on this for various kinds of commodities. We in Michigan grow more diversity of crops than actually any other state but California, so we're faced with this all the time, as you know. So it's very important that you are focused on that going forward. There's another piece, though. While we're trying to sell abroad, we also have to make sure, particularly, that our fruit and vegetable growers don't face unfair competition of imports here at home. This is the other side of that. So we've had this problem with asparagus and tart cherries and blueberries, where we see unfair subsidized foreign imports, essentially dumping in our country, increasing very, very difficult situations for our farmers. Michigan farmers have really been concerned about being successful with these unfair imports and subsidizing of imports. So could you talk a little bit from that end? How do we keep our domestic fruit and vegetable growers in business and ensure a fair marketplace in the U.S.?
Yes. Thank you, Chairwoman Stabenow, for that question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, especially with respect to fruit and vegetable producers in particular. Having worked at APHIS, we have a world-class system of ensuring, plant health, ensuring that our plants are free of pests, et cetera. And I believe we should hold foreign importers to the same standards that we hold our own producers to here. And so if confirmed, I would want to work closely with you all. I'd want to work closely with my team at USTR. And the USDA cooperation, I think, will be critical to making sure that there isn't a backdoor, and that if it is, that we close it, and that we're a lot tighter on our requirements to make sure that what's good for one is good for everybody, and that there isn't two different standards out there. So that's something that I think should be an area of focus, and it will be for me if confirmed to this position.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just say I hope we were able to move this nominee as quickly as possible. Our farmers, ranchers need to have the advocate there with the USTR.
Very well said. And the chair of the Agriculture Committee has made a number of important points, and I just want to come back to one that's central, because a number of us mentioned this dairy issue. We heard some of our colleagues on the other side talk about new trade agreements. And I want everybody to understand that market access is important to a lot of us. But what Senator Stabenow raised as chair of the Agriculture Committee is you also got to enforce the laws on the books.
Right.
In other words, trade is a two-part exercise. Absolutely. Look for new ways to expand access to markets. Put me down for being interested in that every time. Also put me down for the point that Senator Stabenow just made, is you got to enforce the laws on the books. And I'll be home soon having town meetings around the state. I will hear from dairy farmers, as Senator Stabenow mentioned, about whether or not we're going to enforce the USMCA provisions. So I thank her. We've got another trade champ. Senator Cortez Masto is next, and then we'll be followed by Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McKalip, congratulations on your nomination. I am going to talk about the cattle industry, which you probably already addressed, but I was in a cryptocurrency hearing in banking, so I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to further discuss it a little bit. In Nevada, and really across the country, U.S. cattle producers have a personal stake in, we know, protecting our public lands and the environment, and our cattle producers in Nevada are a leading example of that. If confirmed, how would you work at USTR to further promote U.S. beef across the globe?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. One area that I think is incredibly important is that as issues like sustainability and climate become more of an international topic, not only in trade discussions, but in a variety of forums, that the U.S. take better credit and that we help tell the story of our farmers and ranchers better. Because I will put the stewardship of our ranchers and our farmers, what they do for soil quality, water quality, putting ground cover out there, up against any producer around the globe. And I don't think we have been aggressive enough at telling that story and making sure that we get credit, whether it is in carbon accounting or if you're doing modeling, that we use a system that adequately shows what our folks are doing and have done. And we're going to make more investments, and so it's even more important that we get the system set up right so that we're not disadvantaged, essentially, and that our folks end up having, well, it's a new thing, even though they've been practicing soil stewardship since 1985 or wetland protection since 1990, they should get adequately recognized for that in the marketplace. The other thing, as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, that I am concerned about has to do with licensing and essentially renewals of those licensing, because what I find right now is that you have a country, suddenly we have our export licenses expire, or there's a new system set up, and there have been situations in the last year where we've had boats on the water shipping and exporting to a country, and we've been scrambling around to make sure that when they got to the port of entry that the licensing was in place. So if confirmed to this position, I would work really hard to map out, make sure that we have better long-term arrangements so that we're not fighting fires when we ought to be gardening new markets and cultivating new long-term markets out there.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. In your written testimony, you mentioned that you would seek to build on Ambassador Tai and USTR's work to bring more U.S. goods to customers and markets around the world. With various trade negotiations underway, how would you work to leverage all of our tools in the toolbox to assist our agricultural producers, if confirmed? Yeah, so, using USMCA as an example, the types of sanitary, phytosanitary provisions that are there. Another provision of USMCA is the ability to do some rapid response
Those are templates that I would like to try to apply to various regions and various types of commodities. And since we're talking about beef in this conversation, the ability for Japan to raise its safeguard and allow under their quota system additional beef, having those kinds of flexibilities or provisions that really came in handy when Japan realized it wanted more beef. We certainly have beef to sell, so that solution was something that was due to the fact that there was a mechanism there that could be utilized. So as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, that kind of flexibility would be something I would advocate for so that we aren't stuck. And if we have a willing buyer and we've got willing ranchers and farmers here, that we always have the ability to keep trade flowing and to keep marketplace moving.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
I thank my colleague. Senator Grassley is next, and then followed by Senator Young.
Thank you for the time you spent in my office this morning at 8:15. I appreciate that very much. Iowa farmers rely on exports for their business. When they hear the Biden administration promote what is called work-centered trade policies, farmers feel forgotten. The U.S. is creating a leadership vacuum that is being filled by China and the European Union. And by the way, the European competitors do not think that free trade agreements are a 20th century tool like our present administration does. The European Union is working on securing market access for its agricultural producers through comprehensive trade agreements. So for you, in a very general question, how do you intend to promote a trade agenda that will serve American farmers and producers, and will that include advocating for free trade agreements?
Thank you, Senator Grassley, and thank you very much for the time this morning. I enjoyed our conversation very much as well. So as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, if confirmed, I would advocate for farmers the same as we talk about worker-centered policy. Farmers are absolutely workers, and so that would be front and center in terms of my agenda. I think regardless of whether the three letters FTA appear in any of the regional initiatives that we would do on trade, I promise you that I will fight for the absolute full market access for American agriculture in those regions, regardless of what the actual agreement name is or what the initiative's name is. The way I look at it, and I've been 30 years at this business, I agree that free trade agreements are kind of the Eagle Scout level of attainment in terms of what we can do to give farmers market access out there. But I also feel that some of the things we've done, like Japan beef, India pork, Mexico potatoes, are sort of the merit badges on the uniform, so to speak. And so I will work diligently, tirelessly, make sure that my team at USTR are fighting to get a full jacket, sash, everything covered with merit badges, and that at the end of the day, we get the same level of market access for farmers, whether or not the agreement has a certain title or what the name of that agreement may be.
Mexico's non-science-based treatment of agricultural biotechnology is undermining the development of products in the United States, and our farmers suffer as a result of that. This is coming at a time when the world is facing a global shortage of food, a problem best solved by agricultural innovations and technology. So let's assume you're confirmed. What are you going to do about enforcing USMCA biotechnology provisions to prevent disruption to North American grain markets and on-farm innovation?
Yes, sir. Senator Grassley, if confirmed, this will be a key area of priority for me. Biotechnology and agriculture innovation is how we're getting through drought. It's how we get through difficulties in terms of production. And maintaining market access for those products is absolutely vital. I feel that's necessary for us if we have to use USMCA provisions to enforce on biotechnology, that every tool should be at our disposal. This is a key time to have this conversation because as countries, as you referenced, face food inflation and pressures on supply, that we recognize that it's actually ag innovation that's ensuring continued supply. And so we need to make sure that our farmers, if we're asking them to do practices that are helping with sustainability, climate, usually it's elite gene lines and seed that are helping to do that. The U.S. government reformed its biotechnology policy, and so we want to make sure that other countries have access, not just for plants, but for animal-based biotechnology as well. These are all key areas for us, and that'll definitely be a priority for me as Chief Agricultural Negotiator.
Let me end with the unjustified trade barriers on exports of ethanol. This is a matter both for corn growers and ethanol producers. Currently, there's an ongoing countervailing duty order on U.S. ethanol exports to Colombia. I understand that the Colombian government is currently deciding whether to terminate these duties through sunset review. Can you commit to work with your colleagues at the USDA and state to make sure that the Colombian government does the right thing and terminates these unjustified tariffs?
Yes, if confirmed, Senator Grassley, I would work with your team, work with our team at USTR and USDA to line out a strategy in dealing with the Colombian issue that you raised. There are so many opportunities for biofuels right now. Mexico has just gone to E10 recently, or allowed for E10. Japan is committed to doubling its imports of biofuels. So there are a lot of opportunities out there right now for biofuels, and if confirmed, I will be an advocate to make sure that those bobbers that are out there moving on the water result in us getting some fish into the boat.
I thank my colleague, Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues. Senator Grassley's, he's leaving the room right now, but I do want to point out he's been a great advocate for his state's corn growers, and he told me he was going to vote for the semiconductor bill if we could figure out a way to produce those semiconductors out of Iowa corn, all right? We haven't done that yet, but yes, sir. Sir, you just affirmed that you believe in science, which I think is really important. I know you have a strong background in that area, and for me, that's really important as I consider, whether or not to support your nomination and confirm you to this post. USMCA, as you indicated, opens up all kinds of possibilities for our ag tech, including gene editing. Mexico's made all sorts of approval delays, and they really lack a science-based approach. At least they don't fulfill the expectations of my ag producers and my constituents. And this, of course, hurts our own ag community, so I'm glad you're making that a top priority. I also get the sense by some of your comments that you believe in trade. And to me, that's pretty fundamental in light of the position that you've been nominated for. Trade benefits consumers, our ag producers, our rural communities, and really it furthers our national security as well. Do you agree with my last statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that national security and food security and trade are probably more closely aligned right now than they have been in my 30-year career, and maybe in an unprecedented manner.
I am highly refreshed to hear that. I've held some hearings on this topic in the past, something I'm very interested in because it is indeed so important. I would just publicly indicate that I've had some interactions, my office has interactions with USTR, and you're not responsible for this, so I'm not going to pull you into this, sir, but it's important to go on the record and say that there are staff members at USTR who work for Ambassador Tai who say that trade is not a national security issue. Nothing could be further from the truth. From my standpoint, you've just affirmed your belief, and I appreciate that, sir. Along those lines, I think it's also important to understand that the administration, at least so far, has indicated they're not going to be pursuing free trade agreements, that is market access, or looking to renew trade promotion authority that would give them the opportunity to negotiate new free trade agreements. That undermines our national security, in my view, and we need to change that policy. And at a time of high inflation, let me see, inflation reached 10.4% in June for food. We ought to be thinking about negotiating with our counterparties, other countries, about increasing access our producers to their markets and vice versa. It can lower costs for consumers. It can help benefit our ag economy enormously. So you have the skill set, the requisite skill set, sir, I think, to assist, but it's going to require a higher level decision to pursue TPA and free trade agreements. Now I get into the questions. Despite U.S. ag exports to Korea reaching an all-time high in 2021, I agree with Ambassador Tai that there is still room to grow there. Do you share Ambassador Tai's commitment to improving the regulatory process for ag biotech in Korea? Mr. McKalip.
Yeah, absolutely, Senator Young. Unfortunately, biotech has been a barrier to market access in many countries, not just in Asia, but around the globe. And you referenced genome editing earlier in your opening there. This is a time to have that conversation, because what is happening with genome editing and the way it's being utilized essentially mimics what could be done in breeding in a greenhouse. So the risks are commensurate with that, which, you know, from a greenhouse perspective, we've been doing that. We've had experience with that for hundreds of years. So we need to work hard to make sure there aren't unscientific barriers being put on our farmers' products that are being sent abroad.
Very good. That was my follow-up. Appreciate it. Recently, Director General of the World Trade Organization suggested the idea of holding a members' retreat this September. And the idea here would be to find ways to rejuvenate ag negotiations, which have been stalled for years. If confirmed, and should the U.S. be involved in the retreat, what do you believe are the main priorities for the United States with respect to the WTO's food security challenges?
Yes. So looking at WTO, I think even before we start to dig in on specific tweaks or changes, that getting the body to be more proactive, more responsive, and to act quicker and with actual results is really a key. I have tremendous respect for Ambassador Pagan, who's our WTO person there. I would want to work very closely, if confirmed, with her to advocate for the farmer. I think farmers look at WTO, and the ones I talked to, we used to have a tractor that had a throttle, and it had rabbit at the top, and it had turtle at the bottom. I think, farmers have very impatience for inaction. I think they look at WTO, we're not even quite at the turtle sometimes. So, there are some good outcomes from the recent meeting there. Ambassador Tai, Ambassador Pagan worked really hard to get some outcomes there, but we've got to invigorate that body to get faster results, to get outcomes on behalf of farmers, and that's something I'd like to work with the USTR team on.
That sounds like a really important priority. So I'll look forward to doing some good together should you be confirmed, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank my colleague for his questions, and in particular, my colleague raising the point with respect to food and national security is absolutely key, because there is no question in my mind about the possibility of food being weaponized with the challenges that we're facing around the world. So I appreciated that discussion between my colleague from Indiana and our nominee. The senator from Oklahoma has arrived. He might be out of breath, but whenever he's ready, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Coming in from another hearing back and forth is always a joy on a day back and forth. Thanks for your service to the nation already and working with USDA. But I have some concerns on this. I'm just trying to figure out where this is going. We've had the USTR here in this room multiple times. We've had Secretary Raimondo to be able to talk about trade negotiations and what's happening on the commerce side. And the very clear message that we've heard over and over again is we're not going to do trade deals. The President has instructed us we're not going to do trade deals. Now, the first year, we were all asking questions about what are we going to do with the UK? What are we going to do in Asia? Where are we expanding to? Every ag producer in my state, and I have a lot in my state of Oklahoma, all asked me the same question. Well, two questions. When's it going to rain next? That's the first one. The second one is always, what's the new trade agreement that we've got working? What new country? We're overly dependent on China for soybeans. We're overly dependent on certain countries. What new countries are we developing trade agreements with? And I hear from the Biden administration, we're not going to. We're kind of working on the edges of tweaking a few things. So my biggest question for you is, what new trade agreements are we going to organize? And for you, you've worked on domestic policy. How are you prepared to be able to help work with countries to be able to go get new trade agreements? Because we need new places to send pork. We need new places to send beef. We need new places to send wheat. We need new places to send soybeans. We've got great supply. There are customers that are out there. We're just not developing those relationships intentionally.
Thank you, Senator Lankford. I really appreciate that question. And I can't make it rain for your farmers in Oklahoma.
I can't either, but that's all right.
But what I can do is make some rain in terms of trade access. And the farmers I talk to, and in a 30-year career with USDA, I think the reason that they associate those three letters, FTA or free trade agreement, with market access is they look back at past performance and what that has done for them. In my role as Chief Agricultural Negotiator, it will be to get them the kind of market access that they are expecting and that they need, regardless of what the title at the top of the document says. I wouldn't be taking this job, I wouldn't be interested in it if I didn't think I could make a difference for farmers. So what they need, your ranchers in terms of meat products, your farmers in terms of row crops, it's going to be incumbent upon me to deliver the kinds of results and to be an advocate within the system and abroad to make sure that at the end of the day, things that weren't sent to these countries previously, now we have an opportunity there. Quite frankly, we've had a few trade missions already this year. We just had one in the Philippines that completed. Really impressive opportunities are opening up there. I think this is a time when our farmers can really capitalize on sending things abroad in ways that they haven't before. So I want to be their advocate to do that.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is a good time for us to be able to expand. Obviously, what's happening worldwide, everyone's looking for reliable customers. The reason those three letters FTA matter to them is because it's certainty. It outlives an administration. It's something consistent. We know what the trade policy is going to be. Congress has agreed to it. American people have agreed to it. They can put supply chains in order. They can get delivery systems in order to be able to do it. And there's a consistency. If it's only an executive agreement, it only lasts as long as that administration, and they have no idea if it's going to keep going. So why would you develop all of your systems to be able to ship to a certain country and all the relationships that need to be done if you don't know if it's going to last longer than 2 years? So that is important to get some kind of certainty. And my concern is this administration is focused on executive agreements rather than lasting agreements, and they are looking for lasting agreements. With that, what region and what products are kind of first on your list? We've had first on the list that we thought were really ready. For instance, the UK is one of those areas that they were primed and ready saying, hey, we want to be able to make the deal on this. And we're just not seeing the effort being put into that. There's lots of areas of Southeast Asia that are very interested in engaging with us in our agreements. There are other countries that are even looking at the latest agreements that we've made 3 years ago and saying, we'll take that deal, but we're not even trying at that point. So who's first on the list?
So I think we need to be, absolutely, you mentioned UK. I have flown over, met with my regulator counterparts there, and there are a lot of opportunities that are not far from being realized,
right.
And so we need to get there. Southeast Asia for sure is a big one, Latin America, and there are some areas in Africa as well that need to be a major focus for us. And the agricultural commodities differ depending upon which of those areas that you're referring to. So I would want to make sure we've got the boots on the ground and working on behalf of all of those to get some results as early as we can in the process. With respect to IPEV, I think the ink isn't dry regarding whether or not there are enforcement mechanisms in there, the kinds that your farmers want to see and expect. So it would be my responsibility and duty to advocate to get those kinds of hard commitments for agriculture that have lasting power, certainly beyond a few years or 8 years.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the conversation on this. Let me just put this hat on and say to you, I'm skeptical, and it's not you, because I don't know you well enough. But it took 18 months for the Biden administration to even put someone in this role, and they've been very vocal with us that they're not looking for free trade agreements. And when they say they're not looking for a free trade agreement, and then it takes 18 months to even nominate someone to be able to deal with ag policy, our ag folks are really looking for results on this, not hopeful. And so I know that's putting a lot on you as you're stepping into this. But showing some of those results and showing we can actually move from it'd be nice if to actually getting it done will be very hopeful and helpful to the folks in the ag community in my state. So if you can check off the low-hanging fruit in the UK and other places, show progress, and go get some more deals done, that's going to be helpful to the country's economy. So thank you.
We're waiting for potentially one or two more colleagues. I would just say to my friend from Oklahoma, you know, this is a position that is going to concentrate solely on the question of agriculture and trade, and this is long overdue. So like my colleague, I want us to step up and deal with some of these issues. Before my colleague came, we were really pretty far down in the weeds in terms of agriculture policy. My constituents really want to know what's going to be done to make fertilizer more affordable and more accessible, and we talked about dairy and the like. So we understand our colleague wants a strong trade policy. I want to make sure that we have both market access and we tap the potential for American farmers all over the world. I mean, we care deeply about everything from wheat and berries and the like. I also want to get somebody with our nominee's experience and expertise, honed over 30 years in this area. I want to get them in place now and then hold them accountable around the kinds of issues that I think my colleague and I agree on, and that is, you know, our farmers are the best on the planet. Let's just give them a level playing field, and that's what we're going to be working with our nominee on. Let me just check with both sides. Do we have other members on their way? All right. Well, I'll do a lengthy closing statement, and we'll see what happens with others. You know, to be very brief. I mean, the point I would just say again to our nominee, Mr. McKalip, we need a smart trade policy, and it's a trade policy that says from the get-go, from the day you show up, if you're confirmed, and I'm going to be supporting you very strongly, you're going to be all in on the fight to expand access to new markets, because our farmers can compete with anybody all over the world as long as they get a level playing field and they get access to those markets. And as I indicated, market access and enforcing the rules, enforcing the law is key. I come from a state that cares so much about market access. We have this geographical advantage with Asia. What we want to do is we want to grow things, we want to make things, we want to add value to them, and then we want to ship them all over the world. And with the geographic advantage we have, this is an area where we have great opportunities, and a lot of these opportunities pay better than do the non-trade jobs because they've got a higher value added. So you've sent us the message today in a very strong and clear way that you're going to be all in on the fight to expand access to markets and also to enforce the rules. And we're going to have to mobilize some of our trading partners to do more as well, because too many of them, in my view, I think perhaps waiting to see what would happen with this position, we're waiting to see where we were headed in terms of agricultural trade, and I believe you're going to take us in a positive direction. So let me just check with my friend from Idaho. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, we're ready.
All right. With that, we tell our nominee we thank you. We wish you well. I'd also like to say to members with respect to our process for additional questions, the deadline for members to submit questions for the record will be tomorrow, Friday, July 29th at 5. This is a firm deadline. And with that, I thank our nominee, and the hearing is adjourned.